It sucks to be popular.
Oh. So here we are yet again. Another year, another remake. I like the RE2 one, like a lot even, so much so that I made a video about it and why I think that remakes need to cool the fuck down a little bit, ending it with this. Also, Capcom, just leave RE3 alone. I get that it was very flawed and can be improved on relatively easily compared to 2, but this just feels like a one-way backtrack to backtracking the entire series. So please, stop it. Get some help. That line kinda haunted me, not just cause people misinterpreted it, but because I misinterpreted it in the first place, making it easy for said people to do so. The original write-up was far more nuanced and wasn't supposed to take place at the very end, but because I had so many rambles cohesing against each other already, and because I was still trying to do weekly video releases for some stupid reason, I ended up chopping it up, cutting it down, and sticking it right after me legit denouncing the idea of a Silent Hill remake, which, you know, I do still do. I'd rather they just leave that series be for the most part. The pure, unbridled rage of which left me to then even further botch what I had written while reading it out, thus leaving it as I did. I felt iffy about it in the edit, left it as is due to my stupid time constraints, and now here we are yet again. Another year, another remake video. Basically though, if I had the time to properly say what I felt, I'd leave the bits about RE3 having a lot to build upon, but instead say something along the lines of, give it some time, let people wait, don't make it right away. Not knowing that they literally already were doing so anyway. Cause, see, to me, these remakes are a bit of an iffy thing. I'm all for someone being legitimately inspired by an older work and choosing to wholly reinterpret it, like how they did with Scarface or RE1's remake, but when a remake is only made from a cynical marketing point of view or because of the fans bitching, then, yeah, I don't know, I feel like it usually ends up missing the mark, as evidenced by the many divisive yet safe-playing remakes we've been seeing over the past 10 years or so. The Oddworld one, the Shadow of the Colossus one, the Ratchet one, Crash Insane trilogy, those shits. Shits that don't change shit, whilst changing all the shit, thus endlessly perpetuating the same old shit. Pleasing everyone's demand, but no one's actual desires. But yeah, that was then and this is now, when I hopefully won't regurgitate the same video myself, nudge nudge wink wink. Already starting things off on a different tip though is me actually playing the OG RE for a bit this time, which is a bit more then than now, but I didn't do it then for 2, so I am doing it now for 3, and I mean, while I'm not by any stretch a Resi expert, I have noticed that the better games, i.e. 1, 2, the first chunk of Code V, 4, 7, and also indeed 2 make, all have this one thing in common, being that super satisfying feel, perfectly balancing power fantasy with your scheduled dick flattening. Having enough shit to fuck shit up, and having said fucking up feel fucking good, but just as well bitching you down a few pegs, returning the favor of fuck. You always know where to go, or at least how to get there, and when you don't, you can at least take some satisfaction in the exploration of something new, or take part in the fear of the currently still unknown. Shit works, regardless of all of these games using a slightly different structure. However, with RE3, I defo felt that vibe a bit less, as the game feels almost too sprawling at times, or too aimless. There's a lot going on at once, with an overwhelming amount of items and mini mechanics and puzzles that cover large areas, and Nemesis also fucking your ass at inappropriate times. Like, it's not bad at all by any stretch, don't get me wrong this time, please, but I felt way less of a need to continuously keep pushing on. Kinda just felt too confused or lost to do so, you know? That said, I do fucking love the Terminator tank vibes. You is well beefy here, especially when playing it on easy, which is defo my go-to for this one now. Give me that AR and let me fuck shit up. They may as well have called it Dino Crisis 2 mode, as this is where the real game is for me, honestly. It gimps a lot of the aimlessness by simplifying itself and makes the game a tad less brutal on the whole, which is also more or less what the remake does too. Structure streamlined with a wholly new map, less crazy batshit spread out puzzles, in fact it barely has any puzzles. and a bit more deliberate feeling zomboid placement, all making for an easier overall game. A very, very different one too, like I said, a wholly new map. Rack City is not the same in layout even a little bit, the little church place is taken out entirely, and the hospital is a fully featured level more akin to RE Outbreak. Big ups though for me is that this one does have that satisfying, "Ah yes, the chain cutter that I can use on those 2 doors that I remember because I'm not bombarded by like a billion other things at once across a large distance. Get rewards." I like getting rewards, but just not with too much effort, you know? I do adore how you grab the 2 ancient relics from the mystical city pond altar and then put them in a statue, only for it to turn around not to give you an ancient gem. No, but a car battery for the maintenance elevator. I love it. It's beyond stupid and my suspension was in disbelief. In the remake though, it ain't really like that. All puzzles you really get is bolt cutter for door, lockpick for lock, and key for electronic door. It has no crazy elaborate resi puzzles as it's mostly just a game about funneling the player through spooky scary set pieces or action Hank explosion set pieces. Nemesis works in much the same way as well. Originally, he'd just kinda bust out and bust a nut, scaring the ever-living cum out of my ass quite a few times, but much like Mr. X in RE2 Make, shit could also get quite obnoxiously persistent. Adrenaline rushes aside. But in 3 Make, he's far more scripted and set-piecey and way more powerful, thus making him more threatening but less annoying, though not quite as cum-scaring. I think a big thing here is just Raccoon City itself, honestly. Shit was Alley World originally, lots of tight corners and corridors and little room to wiggle, which made Nemi such a force to be fucked with. And also, just aesthetically, like, Jesus. These pre-renders look good. I love me some Alley World, as I am from Alley World, as many Japanese folks would be too. It's what you get when your city's been built far before car. Not really how American cities roll though, is it? They got thick roads with the big lanes and the featureless rectangle buildings aligned endlessly end on end with giant parking lots out front of each. The car zone. Which is where we at now here in current year. They went for realism over identity and made Raccoon City a very regular-ass looking US town. And I wanna be real, shit looks kinda boring for the most part. Few cool signages and lightages aside, you're just gonna be drudging through a lot of very normal looking streets with not a whole lot of detail going on. That are white as fuck too, of course, and so the zomboids can be juked rather easily, and Nemesis had to be giving a tentacle drag and damn near teleportation powers just to compensate for the wide wiggles. So, it works from a gameplay standpoint, I guess, but aesthetically it's a bit of a downgrade in my opinion. I do love the many interiors though. It has some cool places and plenty of legit really scary atmosphere and moments, which I wouldn't say the original quite had, but I gotta admit, that game had a fucking mood. It's weirdly silent compared to the 2 games prior, foregoing constant BGM for great atmospheric sounds, already putting it, ironically, on a more modern tip. Which then makes it even stranger that the remake has almost constant background music. Drony, spooky, synthy music, sure. But it begins to feel way more 80s, 90s action horror movie, and well, on that note, Jill's an actual character now. Woo! Very quippy and cheeky, pretty typical Resi Pro Tag stuff by RE4 Leon and Ethan standards, which fits pretty well here given how surprisingly schlocky the game is. Guess it's hard to make this one a smidge more serious as how they did with 2, but it works in the same snippy way it'd do for a fast-moving B-horror action movie. People don't talk much, one-liners aside, everything explodes for no real reason. It has a bunch of Terminator references too, which I'd imagine was the original inspo for Nemesis in the first place anyway. And the puzzle-less gameplay is high-octane, kinda dumb, with zero time for bullshit, cause oh shit, oh it's Nemi boy. Even the voice recording quality and hum-heavy OST sound very much like an older horror movie. Well, either that or they recorded the voice acting cheaply. Acting and writing is far less natural than it was in 2Make after all. And the animation work ain't exactly stunning either, but it just fits well enough, I suppose. Although, I do think make a cheap near mediocre game out of the cheap near mediocre game wasn't exactly what most people had in mind when they asked for this. As I said, it had a lot of potential to be built upon, nor was it a game that was ever very highly regarded to begin with. But it doesn't really so much build upon anything as much as it just uses the same core ideas, shuffle them around a bit, add some shit here, remove some shit there, and ending up at a weirdly similar place in quality, yet totally different generally. But it makes sense why fans would have wanted it at least. It's not like those crazy Final Fantasy fans demanding that some absolute classic of a game gets remade or anything. That's like a recipe for disaster.
Get down here, Merc.
I never asked for this. When Square dropped that showcase thingy for their new engine over a decade ago, I was like, hey, looks pretty cool. But I never really thought too much of it, only to eventually find out that years later, half of the fan base lost their fucking nut. That's now demanding a full-on remake to be made looking like this. And, I do get it. Final Fantasy VII is a bona fide classic for a variety of reasons, but it's also a game oft-labeled as not having aged well. The models, while expressive and in my opinion charming for what they are, do look shitty with the hoof hands. The FMV is super dopey looking, the translation isn't very great, and the gameplay can be quite slow due to Square's penchant for showing off its elaborate animations. But here's my thing. Those models weren't any better looking by 1997 standards. The game's a looker because of the pre-renders, which, compression aside, you'd have to be mad to say that those look shitty. So, I don't really consider that an age thing as much as just a compromise made to save space. And while the FMV has certainly aged, being that it was top bill at the time and now isn't, the gameplay I don't think was any faster by then standards either. People just put up with it, or didn't. And maybe you did at one time as well, but don't now, which, is fine, but I wouldn't say that that's because of the game changing or aging, but more so because you've changed or aged. Of course, said change in tastes or levels of patience is defo decided by the standards set by current media, which I think pretty much gets to the heart of the vibe people feel when they feel a game like that has aged poorly. But it still seems like kind of a dismissive statement in a sense to me. A catch-all that don't get to the heart of dick and makes a game sound way worse than it in all actuality is. Something that's worth bringing up here is context. Highlight, for example, is fucking terrible. AVGN and Pro Dick Pic Jared both made big videos dogging on it, and many would argue that it's either just terribly designed or that it's aged like milk left in the windowsill for a few days during a heat wave. But Highlight actually came out before both The Legend of Zelda and Dragon Quest. And suddenly a lot of the game's weird awfulness goes from "what were they thinking?" to these motherfuckers were more or less inventing the wheel without any prior examples to go by, set for some stanky-ass PC RPGs that weren't even localized into Japanese yet. Yeah, sure, their wheels sucked ass and ended up a decahedron with a silly mustache painted onto it, but knowing shit like that still makes it feel a lot more nuanced than just game old aged bad, Which is kind of my thing with FF7 too. Early 3D gaming was a bit of a Wild West, and where, say, Tekken 1 ended up with okay in-game models, their FMVs were goddamn terrifying, and where Final Fantasy VII's FMVs were comparatively mind-blowing, their in-game models were, But at least I can still appreciate how they managed all of it with little to no prior examples to go by. It's a fuck of a whole lot easier to look at something and come up with ideas of what need to change or be built upon than it is to set down the foundations in the first place. But that's also just me though. Most people will probably highlight on that bitch and take shit at face value. And besides, no one wants to play turn-based JRPGs anymore anyway. Just look at the sales for Bravely Default or Persona 5. On the real though, I actually vastly prefer action-based combat or more experimental systems than traditional turn-based shit, so I'm I'm pretty cool with what they're doing here. Plus, much like RE3, there is also absolutely a lot of shit that they could expand upon. Realize those cinematic pensions, those dramatic tear-jerky twists, that fully fleshed out big shitty city. Oh, they at least did one of those things very fucking well already with Crisis Core, so yeah, sure, I'm down. Gimme that Final Fantasy VII Remake. Yeah. Riding in on an epic train and blowing up base like an eco-terrorist, being both the prettiest boy and the best girl at the same time, it's Cloud Mech Strife. Look, the mech just makes it better, okay? I will have no one argue this. Also, give him a mustache for good measure. Yeah, there we go. Anyway, it's the same plot outline with the taking down of the Shinra and the looming abstractability of what Cloud and Sephiroth be, only with a fuck of a whole lot more shit taking place in between and during all of that. And the gameplay is also wholly different with like action combat and the structure not all that dissimilar to a Yakuza game. Cloud coming back from a blow bang and instead of getting his money at the hideout, it's like, yeah, so we're poor. Like really poor, so here's some pennies and like a shitty little apartment and here's some side areas with monsters and I'm sure the shop owners could use some help because like, Sector 7 ain't just a single screen town no more, so we can go around and then do some odd jobs together to earn you that pay. And by we, I mean you, seeing as you are the hired hand after all. Which, I could say that this is a cynical way to pad out a 6-hour opening sequence to a full 40-hour game, but I won't because fuck me does it fit the original's ethos perfectly. I did, you see, a video on Midgar and Final Fantasy VII as a whole a few years ago, in which I basically came to the conclusion that it was a game about character. What I meant with that was that its greatest strengths are all found in the little things in the background. Store owners all having a wee meme or micro sub-story, NPCs all reacting and sharing their generally comedic vibings on the game's main events, and dialogue that overall put cuteness first and foremost. And all of this, in my opinion, was best portrayed by the side character, Johnny. Johnny was a character wholly in the background of the original. First encounter would be his house in Sector 7 near Tifa's bar. There you could meet his parents talking about how he's grown up, but also is a trouble boy as evidenced by his cool jacket. Then later on train you see him crying out, leaving town due to the trouble, after which you see him trying to get his nut off at the Honeybee Inn, only to then way further into the game meet the dude at Costa del Sol where he seems to have found his place and settled down. It's one of those things not many people will pick up on, especially with how jank the translation made some of his encounters seem, but a very cool indicator of all of the tiny little cogs cogging behind Final Fantasy VII seams. And
Hold it!
well, he's a big fucking deal here now in a way that feels like such a well-considered love letter to all who would have noticed it back in the day. They even model his parents directly after the old generic NPC models, like they knew what they were doing. And shit like that is all over this game. The two guards arguing about one being too soft, for instance, are there in a big way that I'll even come back to later twice, because that's just how big it is. Hotel Kid is also chilling, the this guy or sick vibes are handled in a super interesting way, and of course, all of those adorable little one-off store owners like Homie lazing about, or the quirky weapon store owner are whole-ass side quest dispensers now. And it's like, man, I could not have hoped for a greater understanding of what made the original tick, even going into things the OG never even bothered with, like giving houses to the gang.
Room 201 here is where I sleep. Don't have time for much else, what with 7th Heaven and all.
Aerith hanging out with the local childs in a big veiny vein drawn right back to this kid from Crisis Core, and shit like Biggs and Wedge having a day job as part of the Neighborhood Watch, doing all manner of monster hunting and tutorial warehouse vibing that you, of course, get to help him out with as you make bondage thusly. It makes it a wholly different type of game, one where character isn't in the background for those looking for it as the more urgent plot pushes things forward, but instead one where everyone's a character proper, dragging that shit out into the foreground, letting things fill in slowly and naturally as you hang out and do shit. Like I said, Yakuza. The districts of which, along with the Japanese model of open world games in general, had always had their roots in JRPG townages rather than the idea of sandboxing. I made a whole video about it even. So, I'd say that it's pretty fucking fitting that the king of JRPG towns, i.e. Midgar, would be fleshed out using this structure. So we in Side Quest City now. Yakuza-style, character-driven side quests that are always quite funny, and some more JRPG-y type side quests too, like kill for me 5 rats in the eastern sands type shit. Midgar's quite a lot bigger now, you see, as all towns get massive, and the areas in between them do so too, with plenty of scrap heap dungeons and quite a fair few areas original to this incarnation, all of which I will jizz over properly soon. For now though, I want to focus on the off-screen of OG Midgar. The dumpster walls, the dirt hovels, the rattiest, dirtiest, don't step on that rogue syringe looking ass places even those home to the lower quarters would choose not to go to. As here is where you can hunt monsters, find goodies, side bosses, and generally just explore mild Metroidvania style and revel in the satisfying grind and combat that sit at this game's now to be addressed core. Thing is, I never really dug grinding in the original all that much, due to the combat, quite frankly, being slow as fuck. Fun to fuck with for sure, and very well balanced and paced in the grand scheme of things. Not to mention that the sole reason for it being so slow to begin with was to make shit look cool in screenshots and video clips, so it could attract non-nerds to this very nerdy-ass genre, which worked out as well. I saw the epic summons, the cool cinematic camera sweeps, the epic explosions and pans paired with even the most base of attacks, and thus needed to get in on that hotness ASAP. It essentially made a slow menu-driven RPG look like the craziest, most action-packedest game in the world, and the time-thinking, time-nature of the ATB certainly helped too. Still, for most normies, the novelty of being tricked into thinking it a action hank wore off soon. Aside from core JRPG fans, most people don't actually give much of a shit about turn-based combat, and so I'd say that fully realizing that which it pretended to be by actually making it be that perfectly honors the intent of the original. And luckily, that's exactly what they did here. Leaving the materia system intact, because that shit was always fun. Adding one of those cool modern orb node Final Fantasy screens, because those just look neat and make point dispersing seem way more interesting than it is to most. And of course, ditch the turn-based menu shit and go full fucking Kingdom Hearts by way of Crisis Core with Final Fantasy XV's kineticness only nowhere near as jank. You get diff combat styles, characters, a stagger system similar to Lightning Returns, which is fucking great. You get dodges, guards, timed parries, super fast zippy zooms and sparkles, explosions, and satisfying beefy bitch battering ram gameplay feels up the ass. I wrote more about it, but quite frankly, I can only give so much of a shit, but it's fun and cool, okay? Kept me on my toes even during normal encounters, not to mention the spectacle-ass bosses that have like whole fucking patterns and shit. It's awesome. What I wanted to get to though was how it improves the overall pace and long-term playability of things. Cause, as I said, you have the rat zones in which I could, and did, spend whole hours smashing up enemies, crates, finding treasures, opening secret doors, finding all kinds of short and long-term rewards like how doing side quests for the shopkeepers nets you lower prices. And of course, you get a bit of character development out of these shits too, like the things involving Johnny that lead to things involving the secret protector hero of the slums that get you to buddy up with this asshole journalist working for a newspaper paid off by Shinra, which is all the lore, or even just the wee comic relief Sector 7 guards of OG's old getting roped up into a wee side quest chain or two, as you can hear the local townsfolk go from, "Oh my god, who's that guy with the big sword? He seems so scary," to, "Oh my god, it's our hero Cloud. Have you heard how he slayed those rats the other day? Super cool," and so on. It's quite neato. So, when I said that Final Fantasy VII had some things totes worth expanding on, I meant that. However, it doesn't quite have it in the same way that RE3 did. See, RE3 set out to do some shit and missed the mark by a little bit with its execution even at the time. Whereas Final Fantasy VII set out to do some shit and did it more or less exactly as well as it could have for its time. It's just that the standards of said time are no longer satisfactory for many. This changes how it can and will change, in that more so than shifting around its core foundations as Remake did, it can really only build things on top of them, which is exactly what they've been doing, as I've talked about with Johnny, the NPCs being fleshed out, the combat realizing its intent and potential, and so on. But sometimes things can also get lost and left by the wayside a little bit. Like, where is Loco Weed? I never once received an item called Loco Weed. I did get bomb plushies. A membership card to a strip club? Various CDs with cool jazzy renditions of the soundtrack? Sure, but I did not receive my loco weed, and I worried that a lot of those goofier elements would be lost to the drama. But luckily, that couldn't have been further from the truth. 7R is funny, cute, adorable, and downright hilarious at times. I would have sworn, for instance, that they dropped the Hell House. Like, look at it. It's a monster disguised as a house in the hopes of attracting the homeless so it could eat them. The genius bit of landlord commentary there, Square. Proud of you. But instead of cutting it, or low-key leaving it as is, they made a whole little fanfare about it and turned it into one mad bitch of a boss battle. If anything, I'm quite surprised with not only how high the enemy variety is, but how cheekily they went about implementing them. The drones and security systems who get activated when the gang are raid. The wild beasts are wolves from the wildlands outside of Midgar who crawled in. The giant rats are monsters drawn in by all of the cute little food stands, the owners of which often paying you to take them down. All of the different Shinra soldier divisions and mechs and shit are introduced and lored up properly accordingly too. And even things like the creepy little sewer crawlies are like really well contextualized, being that they are stuck in between the plates, living off of the wastes left by Shinra, slowly mutating into monsters because of the pollution. And then it's like, well, why don't Shinra do anything about it? And they do, but because Shinra employees get paid like shit and are constantly mistreated, as is shown a large number of times, they do a piss poor job of it.
Huh. Casualty rate. You think I care about the casualty rate? They're pawns in a greater game. If your stock runs low, then go round up more from Sector 3 or wherever else.
Like, yeah, jeez. This stuff was probably all there in the original's design documents, but far as I know, it wasn't ever stated in the game much of anywhere. But here, much like everything else, it's brought to the forefront, giving a great deal of context, rhyme, and reason to this freaky, funky world, making it all the more immersive to be in.
And then there was this crazy looking house, right? And it was all like trying to kill him. But then Cloud was all like, bam, bam, boom!
Your friend fought a house. A house?
Something that the original did very well in that sense, though, was all of the little gimmicks and adventure gamey distractions that kept Midgar from being a talky dungeon where you just walked from battle to text box to battle. Things like the dress-up quest, the timed button door, the motorcycle, being able to enter and engage with restaurants even though it'd do nothing stat-wise, and even this really jerky stealth section at Shinra Building. And boy, oh boy, did they ever maintain that idea here. Right out of the gate, they get you with the dodging lasers and doing cinematic modern gamey bits like the sittles and the balancy walkways and the ladder climbs and the hangs and even the box pushies. But also more G-bike segments and stealthy bits that admittedly are more aesthetic based but still neat, and even some actual puzzles in places where there originally were none. Like that hanging shit underneath the Sector 4 plate was just a few ladders and some vents originally, right? Well, now that's a whole bit, in which you need to feed power to computers to engage locks. Same way how the copy-pasted metro halls before them is a whole ass dungeon set-piece section with a whole bunch of stuff going on, including the monster lore that I mentioned just a bit ago. And I mean, they even give purpose to the wicked claw hand from the ruined highway bit as it's a whole puzzle mechanic now. Like, if none of that shit ain't making shit out of nothing, then I don't know shit. It just does a lot to make Midgar feel more vibrant, with, of course, things like the wall market or the shenanigans at Shinra Building left wholly intact just as well.
So, I got an idea. Frontal assault, guns blazing. Make for a good story.
A lot of those moments, though, used to be rather abstract in their execution, like how really stiff and rudimentary the stealth segment was originally, or how all three of these motherfuckers were able to fit in this air duct, or how said hanging bit or the scalable trash piles weren't exactly really contextualized super well as... What exactly were you even looking at? Like, how is this whole hanging train thing being suspended at all? Not to mention how Arif's church looked mega tiny, probably because they hadn't really gotten used to the whole pre-rendered thing, so they didn't quite nail how to make things scale just yet, which shows especially in Midgar's size in general, due to how it's abstracted by its top-down diorama visual presentation. Can't see sky, yet the exit is only a few minutes away. Massive city up above, but can't swing through a chunk of it on a single chain. And as I've mentioned back in retrospective, just how fucking massive even is the Shinra building. Of course, as I already alluded to a little bit, this is all a product of first-time rendering, careful camera positioning, SNES standard scenario ring, and areas being chopped up by sometimes distant skip implying transitions. But it's something that came out feeling quite odd by the time Crisis Core dropped, due to how it still implied the abstractions set by the original was clearly showing that they did no longer apply. And I could see that having been a massive challenge when making this as well, and it's not something that I expect them to fare well with either. But lo and behold, Midgar's scale is right. The Shinra building is more of a city on its own now, with wee tonnages cropping up on top of it, and Midgar extends way further, even past the walls, with the sky coding being addressed and handled appropriately. Arif's church is also fucking huge now, as is the trash heap surrounding it. The hanging edge climbing segment is much more of a regular dungeon with many verticality and fucking grappling hooks for going the string of gravity-defying garbage. And they even managed the vent by leaving Barrett behind for he too big, and having Cloud and Tifa climb in there all snug, even turning the whole one screen it was originally into this cute little thing in which they do give a hard shit about not being able to turn around. And so, with that, I think it's about high time to get to breaking down the aesthetics of Midgar. The flaws of past media will become its most treasured and defining features as time passes on. I think that's a quote from someone, but fuck 'em. I've said it now. Because it's true. It's kinda ignorant to assume nostalgia to never take hold for even the shittiest of things. Whether if it's dial-up internet and dungy Windows 95 interfacing, or the crackle, pop, and recording qualities of a vinyl record, people who grew up with it will end up liking it. Like, remembered how I mentioned that Final Fantasy VII's FMVs were once the absolute height of video game cinematicness and now look like uncanny poofy doo-doo? Well, who's to say that means that they've aged badly? Because there is no shortage for early CG nostalgia going around the aesthetic heavy side of the internet, I can tell you that much. And besides, for some things, that just works. Any CG FMV based horror game is so fucking weird and creepy just because of how unintentionally unnatural everything moves. RE1's mansion is a good example of that, as even the subtle things that are presumed to be normal, like just how the fucking lighting even works or what type of wallpaper and decorations a mansion like this would have, look weird and off, and it makes me very uncomfortable. But then, you know, there is this cave, which, yikes. But in general, I'd say that in terms of how our modern lens of contextuality would perceive this shit, these FMV horror games have only gotten better with age, due to how canny they be by default. Which is also why I do honestly prefer the look of old Resident Evil 3 over the new one. Uncanny, though, wasn't really what Square was going for with Midgar, I think. And luckily, I also wouldn't say that these pre-renders are like that. Same with RE3, really. When you treat an image as a still one, one's bound to get painting brain. Start adding wee details, treating each little corner, tree, house, or sign like they're all little buddies. You know, Bob Ross shit, pretty much. And when I see the lovingly rendered renditions of the scaffold scrap heap towns, the steamy, crampy, greasy wall market, or the clean, airy, overly formal Shinra building, I see those very same painting vibes. I unironically frame Loveless Avenue and put it up on a wall, and nobody can fucking stop me. A cool thing too is how the limitations can speak to your imagination. I mean, I've always just assumed that you literally couldn't see the sky in Midgar because you literally couldn't due to the camera top down. Fuck if I knew that it was only kind of visible. Plus, what is behind the trash walls? And where do this road go? It's all things hidden by the abstractions that fill in your head, making shit feel way bigger than it ever was. Which is where Crisis Core took a bit of a misstep, as it didn't necessarily fill that in itself, just kinda left it there blandly. It didn't suck exactly, but let's just say that this empty penis-induced rendition of Loveless Avenue isn't really going up on my wall anytime soon. But the remake ones though?
Nice.
Right out of the gates, you see sides of Midgar that you've never seen before. Sides that show that it's also just a regular city that's far more crowded and bustly as it would be. This right here is the top plate, you see, which you only saw like maybe 4 or 5 whole streets from, all things considered, originally, whereas now it's a bit more of a prevalent feature, showing off its cozy alleyways, classic European-style buildings, fancy restaurants, terraces and theaters, classy neon signs, and acres of posters and street art, advertising all of the above as the hue-heavy orange lighting warms up the streets proper. Looking like a mix between Paris and a noir New York. The cars look pretty, the people dress fancy, and even in this post-terrorism disarray, shit's still goddamn gorgeous. Thus, harshly solidifying the classist contrasts between top plate and ground level. As the only thing looking pretty down there is the fake starry sky that is the top plate from up down below. Shit's really cool, honestly. It has that same trashy, diseased, musky vibe about it that it had back in 1997, just much more crowded and, luckily, not afraid of its own jaunt neither. Shinra propaganda being plastered over by anarchic protest flyers and oodles of cool graffiti as the townsfolk dumpster bump their way through conversations, vibing out in the open at the crowded, rickety old food stands, corner shops, and marketplaces all cobbled together from garbage fallen down from up top. Motherfuckers still be getting crunk too, dancing at the bar late at night or kipping on a bench, and the necessity to bridge all areas naturally and not being able to rely on the quick screen transitions of previous mention resulted in these long, dense, trash trench hallways and whole bits of desolation, dead dirt and garbo piles that, as I've already stated, were probably always there but just off screen, taking the big, beautiful, smelly center stage here now. It just has slum shanty vibes like you done know, you know, with the whole houses still made up out of garbage, with all of the cute wee interiors that could entail. TVs still bulky, pipes still dripping, wires still sparking, neon still flickering, and girders still girding. It looks great. It really does. A bit more Kowloony than Escape from New York-y, maybe, just because it has a lot of those no front wall, just open shop type stores, what they have in Asia, but really it's good shit all the same, both in how it honors Midgar's original depiction and how it's a really cool looking, highly detailed setting all on its own. Was a bit worried though that some of the cool, neat little bullshitteries that probably only I care about would be compromised. Like the Japanese text everywhere, which I've always considered to be a massive part of Final Fantasy VII's aesthetic, which is luckily wholly intact if not expanded upon. Like, look at this bank and massage parlor sign, man. This is cool shit. Or how cramped together everything felt. That vibe sure as shit died in RE3 Remake, and it also did in Crisis Core. Moving cameras and fully 3D areas have both move and visibility to consider, as well as performance of course, so things tend to be a bit wider and less filled with gubbins as the pre-rendies of old were. But just one look at Sector 7's marketplace or Olive Wall Market or Sector 5's bars not only put those worries to rest, but showed me that, damn, they can go even more ham. I mean, just look at how much is going on here. How very busy and vibrant the screen is. They really went above and beyond, honestly, even making some of the lesser side areas super aesthetically pleasing, like those hanging edge panels below the plate that once were these scaffolding and vents above a dark void are now these colorful, lush locales with tons of exploration and tons of neat little lore bits like learning about Midgar's waste disposal system, i.e. those thick pipes dumping shit down below. Set colors, by the way, are a part of this game's generally excellent use of lighting. The original did some cool stuff with neon signs and hues as well, but it's a bit more one note in some ways. It's all very dark and gray and moody, wall market aside, and while I do love that absolutely, and is very much appropriate for what they do with it there, I fucking love how bright and sunsetty and warm and gorgeous and just colorful it can be here due to the properly realized de-abstracting of the sky. I spent most of the game cam-panned up, slowly walking just to soak in the majesty of it all, which felt great to do as well. During combat, the camera can be a bit of a bitch, but otherwise it is by far and away the most smoothest to play Final Fantasy game since 12. No weird clipping or jerky momentum or hard to position cameras or any of the shit plaguing 13 and 15. This is really great. Anyway, as I was saying, OG Midgar is a bit one note. Uniform. But new Midgar big. Thing is that this game's structure follows the same basic one as the original, only it's a fair bit slower in a non-stretchy, well-fleshed out sort of way. There's tons of distance between bombing missions 1 and 2, as stated prior for instance, which feels quite natural, as you don't plan shit like that quickly, I'd imagine, and you get a lot more time to get to know the main gang as well. Same way that you spend a long time hanging out with Aerith, Zack style. Or how all of the minor areas are full-on fun dungeons now. At the end of the day, the main plot beats, the game's skeleton, if you will, remains the same. You still go from bombing mission to Sector 7, to bombing mission 2, to Aerith, to Wall Market, to Sewer, to Pillar, back to Wall Market, to Shinra Building. Just with a ton of stuff I have and will still break down in a little bit more later, stuffed in between. However, I could see how that could have gotten boring were Midgar as aesthetically uniform as it was back in the day. And so each sector has far more of its own distinct vibe now, with Sector 7 basically being a wholesome slum, with the alleys, the market stands, the underground trenches, and of course the train graveyard vibes it has always had, just taken to further extremes, like letting you wallow about decommissioned train factories and shit. Plus, it also adds an outer edge type area with dry deserty outer rims, overall just easily being the slummiest of all. Then there's Sector 5, which is now a towering mountainous scrap heap mine McLumber mill area with a lot of climbing and dumpster dude houses and sneaky little pathways hidden behind the skyscraping rubble, as the town situated within it is far more overgrowthy than anything in Midgar ever was, because Aerith is like Jesus now, so that shit just spreads. I'd rag on it if it didn't look fucking beautiful, and if it also didn't neatly intensify the closer you get to her house. It's super cute. But then there's the Wall Market, the place that's by far and away the most iconic, and the one I was also the most looking forward to. And man, it's it's just so much right now. It's quite literally Kowloon. Or it always was, hence the wall in Wall Market, but to my knowledge, this wasn't ever really lured up in the game, and here it is. It's a congregation of those who built Midgar, a place where they could take a load off while they did. And so it attracted gambling, bars, prostitution, strip clubs, stabby alleys, massage parlors, scabby restaurants, a fucking coliseum, and everything else one might assume a lawless place built by workmen would attract. Rather than demolish this hellhole though, Shinra just walled it the fuck in. And so now it is as it is. Perfect. Initially, the vibes felt a bit different given that the sweaty, sleazy, sexy, dumpy affair gave way to a bright, bold, loud, carnival, bizarre-ass funhouse. But those are just the main streets where the tourists go. The moment you veer off in either direction, you could find yourself swamped in bitches in the red light district, trapped in an alley with some threatening bubby boys after being lured into a less than friendly loan shark office, or find yourself digging through the piles of garbage spawned by the backsides of the various restaurants and markets. And I really like that addition. Red light districts, the real-life neighborhood what Kamurocho is based upon, and even actual slums and favelas will always have a "see officer and/or foreigner, it's not that bad here" type main street, distracting one from all around it. Plus, even in between all of that, all of the original enterables and talkables have been left wholly intact. So not only is it a faithful recreation, it is, in my opinion, also a very apt adaptation of what it was originally trying to be, i.e. Kowloon Walled City, but owned by a fun-loving, horny, opulent, sleazeback sociopath. Not to mention that it goes hard on the Johnny. I could make a whole video just on this place alone, honestly. Shit's basically made for me. Otherwise, the only other aesthetical worry what I had was the Shinra building. I saw a few screens prior on Twitter and it looked very dark and evil. Even though the thing that in my opinion always made it work was that it was just a regular office building. One with Joe Normie businessmen, tourists, other employees just minding their own business, working out, lounging, having some lunch or a coffee, or doing some hard-ass work on like computers and stuff. Same in Crisis Core, it's just a normal office building, at least within the vision of this world, that just so happened to be owned by an evil man. You know, like most actual big corporations. But luckily, darkness aside, that is still what it is. Because rather than it just being an evil lair, it has that future neo-noir jazzy vibe about it. And quite frankly, shit looks beautiful and was really fun to fuck around in, even with the added basement full of bomb juice experiments. You can still see homies on PC or having a coffee at the cafeteria as Tifa goes feral and violently trashes their shit. These homies as well being a pretty key thing to Midgar as a whole, now that I think about it. Whether it'd be the nervous suit and tie salarymen and desk clerkian dressed motherfuckers that you see here, or the 80s punks with the spiky hair riding around down below, the denizens of Midgar have always been quite the colorful bunch. Which they kinda missed the boat on back in Crisis Core, didn't they? Nomura was still hard in his H&M-esque streetwear phase during the mid to late 2000s, as was also seen in the Third Birthday, which took a lot away from the absolute punk gutter dinge that inspired the city in the first place. It's just got goddamn motherfuckers dressing the same on top plate as they do down below. Like, what the fuck, man? And luckily, they weren't afraid to ham it up in that same goofy way, if even a tad more realistic here. Like, sure, there ain't no more bums sleeping on the train, as we now have worked-to-death employees doing just that. So the message remains the same. Otherwise, though, we do most certainly have some very over-the-top punky Mad Max-looking ass motherfuckers, tattered clothes-looking ass regulars, straight-up leather boy-looking dudes, and of course, decently normal-looking people on top plate and businessmen that Shinra build. This was one of those things I fully expected them to turn down, but really they only went in much harder, like pretty much everything else I've talked about so far. And yeah, there you go. Hidden Sexy Stages episode. Sexy Stages Midgar remade, even. Now fucking stop asking me about it, bit. Anyway, I'm pretty sure that this game has a story too, so I should probably talk about it or some shit and maybe bring up what the original did a little bit. Perhaps also start with FF7 being kind of a simple story? Yeah, sure. So FF7 was kind of a simple story, certainly within the circular walls of Midgar. Shinra bad and must be stopped, but uh-oh, Sephiroth. You did that as Cloud, together with Barrett, aka Mr. T, Tifa, aka childhood friend Boobs, Aerith, aka Cheeky Jesus, and Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse, aka Barrett's squad called Avalanche, who could be summed up as Cool Guy, Fat Joke, and Girl Who Likes You and is not afraid to be very forward about it. That was it, really. Simple characters who were kinda tropey, aside from the main core gang who would really only flesh themselves out post-Midgar. Even the villains, like the Turks or Pimp Daddy Don Corneo or El Presidente himself, felt more like little caricatures and anime tropes than anything super deep. And all of that is fine. As I alluded to, it takes it into quite a few cool places as the game goes on and keeps things simple for the purpose of an action-paced, fast-paced opening sequence. Clear language, easily graspable concepts, that sort of thing. The writing did have a fair bit of nuance to it, certainly in Japanese, with a lot of tonal implications and character subtleties, but even then that was all by 90s standards. You enter the reactor and Barrett just starts expositing at you, with even Cloud remarking that he doesn't need a lecture, and Jesse is right in there with the lovey-dovey no build-up, and Tifa be all like, "We're childhood friends, lol, you care for me now," and it's like, oh, okay. Sure. It's a bit ham-fisty, only the ham is your ass and the fist is Barrett's gun arm. Though, I do love a good fisting. And it's defo exactly that where the game gets a lot of its charms from. Things are just kind of adorkable. Has that SNES era JRPG quirk to it, with all the guards and NPCs and even the tutorials being very comedic reliefy as the game rushes past key plot points and character development like they ain't shit. Some people might not like it, but I ain't fucking some people. I am me.
Some people. Nice to meet you.
But now, here in Remake, you enter the reactor and Barrett just starts expositing at you as Cloud and Jesse are clearly like, bruh. And Jesse is literally right in there with the fuck me vibes, no build-up. And Tifa be all like, LOL, I'm your childhood friend, care for me, I got big boob. And it's like, yeah, okay, I'm down with that. And even the main villains like the Turks or Pimp Daddy Corneo or El Presidente himself are like these caricatures and anime tropes and wait, what the fuck? So, not only did they wholly maintain the tone and intent of the writing of the original, they also made it so that I now want to fuck everyone in this game. It's really good. Quite good, even. They knew what they were doing. because they did not change what made the original work, they simply added to it. Jessie, for example, is now not just horny, she's horny in that she's a theater girl desperately wanting to live out her Romeo romantic tale and thus is just fooling around. And Wedge is defo still a walking fat joke, but one who owns cats, named after Biggie Smalls, and is by far and away the sweetest person in this entire game. And Biggs is indeed the tough guy still, but as Wiggs say,
Hope he isn't worst casing it again. He's got a habit of overthinking things, worrying about all the possible outcomes till his head hurts.
Wouldn't have guessed.
And when he worries, I worry.
Not to mention that he funds an orphanage. Now, Barrett expositing isn't 90s video game writing, it's just Barrett. He's passionate, loud, and will tell everyone and anyone about what his deal is. And his interactions with Cloud are so fucking perfect as a result, perfectly capturing that spiky ass fucking pizza shit don't care level back and forth. Just now with added facial expressions and battle banter and all of the subtext and subtleties not nuked by a hastily done localization. Again, it's not cutting the cartooniness or ham-fisting, it just has the decency to loop you up now and make sure that you finish first. It does still have some JRPG writing, sure, with a whole lot of sighs and gasps and pauses that work better in Japanese than they do in English, but honestly, if you ain't down with that, then who the fuck even are you at this point? Regardless, it mainly builds upon these people by how much more time they have to breathe now. Like that whole Sector 7 money quest I mentioned way earlier isn't just alone with Cloud, it's together with Tifa. And through it, you can bond with her on her own terms, rather than being force-fed a childhood friend narrative, so that by the time it does get to the point of seriously discussing that, you're already invested emotionally. Especially with how downright funny and adorable the equipages is. Jessie also talks about Tifa prior to meeting her in that jealousy, pokey, jokey, investigating into Cloud's social lifey sort of way, which both buffs her up as well as preempts the inevitable boobage you're gonna have to face, and everyone just bonds so very naturally now. Cloud, Tifa, and Aerith constantly having to save each other asses throughout their wacky adventures, leading up to the latter's kidnapping, strengthening their triangular gangbang like you done know. Not to mention the time Cloud spends with either, and you even getting some neat little buddy moments, side stories with all of the Avalanchers. It's pretty fucking solid in the way that I'm going to highlight deeply now. As stated, the plot follows roughly the same beats, but how it gets to those beats and what those beats will mean to you once they'll beat is quite different. A very basic example is how Cloud grows to give a shit. In the OG game, he gave no shits. Bombing mission 1 and 2 were just jobs. Then he met Aris and the plate fell and now shits are given. It was simple, quick, but not exactly very weighty in the grand scheme of things, well executed though it was for what it was. But here, mission 1 ends, and as I've said, a lot starts happening, and before you know it, Cloud actually begins to like Biggs, Wedge, and Jessie a little bit, as he keeps meeting them about town doing weird odd jobs with Tifa. Eventually, culminating in when in this version, Cloud doesn't get the go-ahead on mission 2. They ditch him. Barrett, Tifa, and the gang will be enough, and so Cloud saunters on home before he finds himself running into some trouble relating to Barrett, which then gets a boy to worry, and he already was worrying about Tifa, who prior to this opened up about not wanting to go do the bomb mission at all, so then, when right before going to bed, with all of this on his mind, Jessie asks him for a favor he ends up going with. Which results in quite the amazing little heartfelt adventure with her, Biggs, and Wedge raiding a Shinra depot for bomb parts with all of the love, heft, action, humor, stakes, OCs, whole new fucking areas, and drama that they possibly could have squeezed out of it. With even a whole backstory for Jessie that fits thematically like a glove. Giving her, and many of the others by proxy, more of a reason to fight other than, yeah, fuck Shinra, lol. All of this, anyway, means that by the time the bombing mission do commence, it'll mean a lot more to you and to Cloud, who do actually cares now. Maybe not even about the mission yet, but certainly for the people he's doing it with. And I don't think I need to tell you how certain later events resulting from this mission will come crashing down quite hard on a boy. It's pretty fucking well done, and the game pulls more deeper things like this as it goes on, taking all of the wee seeds, samples, and implications planted by the original and growing various beautiful flowers out of them, all standing stronger than the sum of their parts. Now, there are two integral things regarding Final Fantasy VII's story. One that I feel should be maintained, and another that I feel could be done better. These are its moral ambiguity and its foreshadowing of later post-Midgar plot points. You see, I'd really like them to keep the ambiguousness of its moral ambiguity, in that the Avalanche gang is pretty much wholly 100% convinced that their terrorism is the good kind, and I do agree, but innocent people still die. And how does one know this? Well, just by talking to random people, really. It's not ever brought up by the main gang at any point during the main plot. It's more like a haunting zeitgeist on the side, showing that terrorism, even with morally justifiable goals, still imbues terror into the hearts of many. Because, they don't really know who is doing these bombings or why or when they'll strike again, and you physically see the otherwise non-addressed fallout of this with people running around in a panic post Mission 1, as nearly half of this small neighborhood got caught in the blast. Though, even then, you could still easily see this as just wacky old video game bullshit. They run in, but it ain't like no one says anything unless you prompt them to, and it's not like you know what this place looked like prior either. For all you know, Loveless Avenue has always been in a state of disrepair, as many other places in Midgar are too. It's really neat, and one of those moments where the game's writing and restraint really shines. So, naturally, in the remake, it is revealed that the bomb didn't actually blow, and that it was President Shenron and Heidegger triggering the blow-up in order to both kill the Avalanchers and to frame them by making them look way worse with a blast far more powerful than what Jesse's bomb had intended. And instead of them still then coming out of it like, LOL, fire on butt, as they ignore all of the carnage, it's
Our house! My office!
Why did this have to happen to us?
It's a bit less subtle. Barrett then talks about revolution never coming without sacrifice, trying to coax the gang out of feeling like they just pulled a 9/11, and I quickly began to feel that this version was too totally and utterly shit all over the subtlety and intent of the original. No gray area, no ambiguity. Just Avalanche not being that bad, you guys, and Shinra being a cartoon black and white villain. But little did I know was that they were going to take it in an equally interesting new direction. They really couldn't have done the ambiguity in quite the same way, as the visual presentation just demands attention being brought to it, lest it's been leaving left at all. Characters talk more, there ain't no abstractions, so if Cloud and Barrett and the gang weren't to acknowledge it, it would have seemed super duper clunky. However, what they could do instead is shift the subtlety elsewhere. That being Shinra. As they aren't just an evil army, they're the government. They have medical people, cleaners, firefolks, motherfuckers actually acting from the kindness of their hearts, helping the citizens caught in the blast here. Like I've said before, this version of Midgar is a far more lively, believable city, so it makes sense that they do more than just shoot gun and guard shit. Granted, the original game had these very same two funny guards as well, but the more I think about it, that was really it in regards to humanizing those working for the company. It's not like here where you can see Shinra office workers on their days off talking about the effects of the bombings frankly.
So the Mako reactor's broken?
For now. But don't you worry. We're gonna fix it. It'll be up and running in no time.
Really? That's great!
Sure is, sweetie.
As happy as the gang is with their terrorism, actual Shinra employees either seem nonplussed or beyond fucking stressed dealing with the fallout.
I have nothing more to say to you and your friend. The Sector 4 offices got the worst of it. Everyone's panicking over there.
And moreover, that they do also care on a more human level.
What are you doing?
Trying to keep you alive.
But I work for Shinra. I'm the enemy.
I don't care. I don't want anyone to die. Please.
I'll look after the others.
This shows not only how grabby and fisty the Iron Fist of Shinra truly is, in how they still for sure have everything under control, but also how, like most actual evil corporations, it's usually not the people doing the actual on-floor work that are to blame, regardless of how black and white Barrett might sometimes say it be. Similarly, even those below plate is torn. You can hear NPCs being all, "Aw man, fuck those platies, let them suffer," and others go, "But they're people too though," and others being visibly upset by how bad others think it is, well, Look up. How is that not progress? While at the same time you see people sleeping on the streets and drowning their sorrows living in houses made up out of trash. Basically, what it do is drag the background subtleties into the foreground as proper plot elements, like I've probably said like a bunch of times by now. It felt like a sacrifice at first, but honestly, this makes everything so much more emotionally weighty in the grand scheme of things, as you have big reasons to hate the Shinra top brass, because you now know how backstabby and scary they are, even disregarding the lives of those loyal and indebted to them, and how the many people in this game that you care deeply for died as a result of them. It essentially emotionally bribes you into self-justifying the eco-terrorism something fierce, using the moral grayness and the immoral darkness as a fuel for the fires of justice. Also, like, Midgar is full of cats now, and you need to protect the cats. Do it for the cats. Cat City. But yeah, that was the thing that I wanted them to keep, which I guess they did, kinda. The thing that I wanted them to definitely change though was the foreshadowing. What I mean is that due to both the derpy old visuals and the also far from stellar localization, a lot of the cryptic build-up to Zack and Sephiroth related twists fell kind of flat to me. Like Cloud just falling and the sound effect happening and some text appearing, no name, no context. Or when Homie woke in a church and you get some people talking to each other but no way to really know who's who and who's saying what and why. Like, is it an inner monologue? Is it Zack? Is it Sephiroth? Well, now you know, with it being all cutscene-y and Amorai and shit. Also, I'm pretty sure that in the original, Sephiroth's name isn't even so much as hinted at until he killed El Presidente. Granted, the destruction and blood and horror what he leaves behind is one hell of a first impression, but it's also kind of like, oh my god, that sword! It's Sephiroth! Wait, who? The legendary warrior who died, only he didn't. Oh. Okay then. And then, of course, after that, they go to Calm and they explain things. You know, it's fine. But with Midgar being the whole game here and how detailed and well built up everything in this game is as a result, it would have felt really bizarre and out of place had it hit you with it like that in the exact same ways. So, you know, it's good that the flashbacks make sense to me now. Similarly, they also had to make the Shinra far more of a proprietary force of villainy, so them bombing aside, they have whole-ass cameras everywhere, monitoring the gang's every move, scrumptiously scheming in that hand-rubbing, maniacally laughing, mustache-twirling sort of way, which is hilarious and on-brand as fuck. Where the foreshadowing goes a bit overboard though is in how the game treats Aerith as prophetic. She's fucking Flower Jesus now, bro. You get this regular shit being blown out of proportion type shit and a lot of fan-driven remakes, sequels, and retellings, sadly, and it's kind of why I don't necessarily want them. Aerith was just some chick Cloud happened to bump into who then later turned out to be quite important coincidentally. She wasn't there all like, here, take this flower as destiny for saving me from the reunion demons that are here now, I guess. As her fucking theme just blares away in the background like it ain't shit. Like, nah, Cloud just bought a flower. They didn't deify her Advent Children style right at the fucking introduction. That's stupid. She ain't shit yet. Stop treating her like she is, damn it. And, oh boy, those fucking reunion demons as well. Or the plot contrivance dementors, as I quickly began to call them in my notes, fucking up the plot a fair number of times. For instance, when they need Jesse to not go with on bombing mission 2 because the story be that way now, which is perfectly fine, good even given what they do with it, they don't write up a good reason for it. They instead hit you with the, uh-oh, random ghost, Jesse took a tumble and hurt her leg. Aerith and Cloud also literally get dragged out of the scene by them because I guess making them run away post-badass fight would seem pretty awkward, but like, why this as the alternative though? And there's a fair few instances like this where the sole reason for them to show up is simply to contrive the plot in a certain direction. And so I started thinking, is the game getting meta? And yeah, I think it is. In a very Nomura-ass way, at least. As you see, these Dementors are the arbiters of fate, embodying the will of the planet, correcting those who stray off course. So, you know, every time things dread to happen in a way that didn't in the original, these guys step in to contrive it back to where it need to be. And if it wasn't clear enough by now, spoiler warning, they end up fighting this fate in the end. in that now we can decide our own fate type of way, i.e. the game telling you that now that you've gotten your Midgar fan service, it'll be free to go where it need to go for this plot with these much more fleshed out characters, rather than them being forced to follow and wallow in the past too much. Even literally having the Dementor Sephiroth Kingdom Hearts boss clusterfuck drag you through bits of the compilation showing parts of Zack and Advent Children hinting that those will be more integrated too, and just wow. No More Eyes is definitely gonna piss some people off with this shit, but count me right the fuck in for whatever's next. Also, yeah, about the compilation shit. Shit is hella integrated already. Like, in the phone game, for instance, before Crisis, Avalanche is a whole big militia. I always thought that seemed weird because it's clearly Barrett's passion project, but here it is revealed that his gang is just a weirdo extremist offshoot. The bigger Avalanche cell is the Old Guard, the actual old militia, shown, seen, and acknowledged by President Shinra talking about the attempt on his life, aka the plot of Before Crisis. It also draws great parallels between Cloud and Zack, as Cloud just goes in to cause a distraction and cut loose as if the puppy, and when Biggs offers to fix and mod the Buster Sword, he'd be like, no touch. But then he looks at it and sees the wear, tear, and rust, which then makes him give in. Aerith, as stated, also has this kid who she hangs with, who I'm pretty hecking sure is at least supposed to be a nod to the kid from Crisis Core who be thieving, and also that town has an orphanage now, which is defo in line with the Wii theme they tried to set up way back there in CC for sure. No less goddamn Advent Children and that one book-ass book. And when you get to explore it proper for the first time along with Aerith, it hit you with those Crisis Core ass acoustic guitars, and it's like, okay, I see what we're doing here. And then, you know, they drop this.
Hey, sit tight, man. I'm gonna go get Kunsel.
So yeah, if you're one of those weak-minded, insignificant scumfuck beta humans who thinks the compilation games are bad and not in the spirit of the original or whatever the fuck excuse, then you might hate, or alternatively, you could see this as a chance for them to better re-implement these things. Me though, I'm pretty elated that my inner 13-year-old is getting what he wants. It's GAC time, baby. Those who can't come themselves will absolutely come by my hand. Original post at GACT. Hashtag GACT. Hashtag daily workout. In either case, I think I can safely say that this game is pretty hecking my shit. It has a lot of very emotionally resonant payoffs based on its cool cast in ways that the original couldn't even hope to have. And I personally found the side quests and combat to be really fucking fun, and in general, it just builds upon and expands the foundations of Final Fantasy VII's Midgar segment really nicely. They milked it for all it's worth, wholeheartedly, in the best way one could ever mean that. As far as the whole game go though, it can still go either way. I do actually legit have some misgivings about the Fate Dementor ghosty shit, as they could easily go hog bonkers with that in that, okay, this might destroy everything a little bit, third birthday type of way, but we'll see, I guess. At least I can fully say, no ifs, ands, buts, asterisks, or caveats, that part 1 of FF7R is great. In terms of fully from the ground upping and reimagining a thing at least, this one works out and clearly had a lot of heart put into it. At the same time though, on the Resi side of shit, Remake ain't exactly setting the world on fire, nor does it really improve upon the original super duper much either. If anything, it's just different, and Capcom already has a new division set up specifically for another remake, and RE4 was trending with fucking head-ass motherfuckers now wanting a remake of that, which, I mean, that's a whole can of worms, but I don't think they will or really even could do that perfect shitstorm held together by tape of a game any justice ever again. Not to mention that it's playable literally fucking everywhere anyway. The other option would be Code Veronica, and well, RE2 and FF7 both worked because the remakes added and built upon their already super solid foundations, and Code V is wonky at best, and well, you can really only pile so much upon wonky foundations before the whole thing comes on tumbling down. Oh, fuck off, Capcom, eat my ass. So once again, I say, maybe don't keep asking for this shit, as things are turning mighty cynical very, very fast, and I for one don't want to be stuck in the past. As I said, I think remakes can work in the sense that an artist just has a cool idea to reinterpret something like Scarface or whatever the fuck movie example I gave, but as a means to improve or replace something, it's bullshit. Final Fantasy VII-R is great, but Final Fantasy VII still stands on its own 2 feet with its own qualities, as the things 7R improves upon are really only there in order to make the Midgar segment work as its own standalone piece. Had the original had all of this shit, it would have been disgustingly bloated and terribly paced, so let's be real, how worth it was Final Fantasy VII Remake really, if they won't even include the fucking pirate pillow? 0 out of 10, whole game ruined! Due to the changes made to the overall style of the game, the changes cascade like dominoes. A hut becoming a heart, Midgar being more open and fleshed out, characters being full-on characters, foreshadowing being more foreshadowed, and so on and so forth. All necessitate that everything around it needs to be adjusted too. One change is the result of another, and of another, and of another. So, taking points on their own, like saying, I don't like Sephiroth being more prevalent, or my critique of the altered ambiguity, don't fully work, as the OG ambiguity can't work because of the fleshed out characters. And comparisons don't work out too well either as a result of that, but that's the road I took as I started writing the script ages ago, and I'm too lazy to wholly change it, much like the game too is tied to the shackles of its ramshackled past. Wholly on its own merits though, I'd say that it's a very cohesive experience in which all cascading dominoes knock each other over perfectly, making for a very nice image once you zoom out. Or at least, I think. Truthfully, it's hard for me to disconnect and judge it as a work devoid of its past, because I guess it just isn't. Context gon' be what it be. Though, much like the supposed aging of a game, that context will too change with time. At the time of me writing this, I have no clue how the fanbase will react to this game at large, let alone the normies or the professional journos, but I can see many comparing it negatively or positively to the original for a variety of reasons. Expectations still freshly caked in from what they either know it to be or from what they remember it as, but as those expectations fade, or rather, age, new ones can be made with this work based on its own merits and downsides. So, whatever I feel now probably won't mean much 10 or so years from now when we can start nostalgically looking back at Final Fantasy VII-R with a different point of view. Ironically, only seeing this new old game for what it is, once it'll be an old game all on its own. Aging is context. The games stay stagnant, but purely by how we perceive them through the lens provided by us by the times do we decide if we still fuck with them or not. Graphics may go from envelope pushing to ugly to art style, and game design might go from brand new to dated to refreshingly different from what we're used to now, thus making shit good again. Absolutely gorgeous graphics and a great soundtrack. The gameplay is fun and well balanced, and a solid evolution of Crisis Core combat. The story has a lot of heart and emotional gut punches, but will sometimes stray into confusing Nomura territories. And it might displease hardcore fans with its departures from the original. Once again, that's a 9 out of 10 IGN.